I was approached by NZTrio to compose a piece for them specifically to perform with Taonga Puoro, which are the Māori traditional instruments. When I first started working on the piece and delving into the world of the Taonga Puoro and learning more about it, I realised how little I knew about it and how it's a very interconnected aspect of the culture, and you can't really play a note on one of the instruments of the Taonga Puoro without representing an ancestor or representing a guardian or somehow speaking to some great network of other associated things. So I decided that I needed some help on the project, and I didn't want to really work alone. I wanted to collaborate on it, and that's actually something else that's quite natural to the Māori way of making music. I first met Horomona Horo when I was doing some work with Moana Maniapoto, and he was playing in her band, The Tribe, and I had written some arrangements for NZTrio to play with Moana. Horo has a real magic about him and is able to really capture something special in the instruments. And each time I've worked with him, I've really enjoyed his energy and the perspective that he brings and the knowledge that he is very, very generous with when he talks about what he's doing.
Now, some of the instruments that we've come up with or that I've visualised playing in this particular composition, Toi Huarewa, brings and interweaves certain musical notation and musical story. And with the traditional Māori musical instruments, or the Taonga Puoro that I use, I wanted the voices of the instruments and their personal story to come and interweave with the storyline being told in Toi Huarewa.
The development of this work is very much a collaborative one, possibly more so than a lot of works that we commission. Certainly Victoria brought some ideas to us in a workshop setting, and we experimented with her. She made suggestions and we might respond with, we might even come up with sounds that she didn't intend but inspire her to develop another sort of concept. And so there's a lot of toing and froing, and some really happy accidents happen.
A lot of those collaborative moments may come out of the words that Victoria might give to us, some sort of inspiration, like if we are trying to match one of Horomona's sounds and trying to make a similar resonance or something like that. She might just indicate that what we're looking for perhaps is a more husky sound. It was a word that she used at one point.
Tim Worrall I met when I was working on the opening ceremony for the Rugby World Cup. I asked him to work with me just really as a consultant and a kind of a conceptual inspiration for the piece, because he has such a lot of knowledge and is able to cast new light on pretty much anything.
One of the really interesting components of this piece for me is that interface of Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Pākehā, and it runs right through the piece. Obviously that's with the instrumentation, with the musicians, but even more so with the that origin mythology or narrative that underpins the piece.
One of the approaches that I decided to explore with this piece was the idea of taking a non-musical structure for the piece, because that seemed to be a place where everyone could start. The Taonga Puoro are an oral tradition, and the piano trio is a written tradition, and so I wanted to find a way for both of these two groups to be able to read from the same page. And I thought that an interesting way to do that would be to create a myth, taking the existing tikanga of the instruments and thinking about the ancestry of the piano trio as well, and creating a story which weaves those things together. So I wrote a myth called The Story of Puiaki and Tawhiti, and every single instrument and every single note in the piece of music is tied to this myth, and all of the instruments perform a function.
My role on the project has been to support and to be a soundboard for Victoria in terms of the mythology that she's constructed, which underpins the music piece. She's working very much in a Māori context with a set of Māori characters, Pueaki, Hene Pu Te Hue, Tamanui Te Rā, and has created this beautiful little love story or love mythology, which is then the inspiration for the piece from there.
She spoke about a piece that she was really interested in doing and was focused around the raukatauri, or the New Zealand native case moth, and the story of her life. And when she was sharing her concept with me, I fell in love with it, because one of the most interesting things about the putorino, or the instrument putorino, and its connection to the raukatauri, is what really got me involved in loving music.
He brings his instruments and has different ideas about what sounds his instruments, how they could interact with the sounds that we're making, and so it's really wonderful to see what comes out of these sessions.
He's finding sounds and selecting instruments which have a particular sound or timbre or just a resonance which enhances the story. So it's a very, it feels to me a very emotional work in an emotional language.
So now we have been through this process of experimenting with some sounds and thinking about how it all fits together. I have a much clearer idea about what I'm trying to achieve. And the other really great thing about collaborating is that, of course, Horo is here and Tim is here and the trio are here, so we all get together and we'll talk about the music and we'll talk about what's working for people and what's not working for them.
From the first breath, the first movement, and when the first interlocking sounds between each of the instruments and each of these spirits or souls, voices of music connected, it really got me going.
To me, it represents a progression forward, which is that a Pākehā person who has a strong connection to this land, who has worked with Te Ao Māori a lot, is locating herself as tanata whenua in some ways, not as Māori, but as and of this land. And if there's been something that I've been excited about being able to give her, it's actually being able to say from a Māori perspective that that's great and that's appropriate and that's, and that there's magic that can come from that.
You can't know whether or not it's going to be good or bad and it's irrelevant, but you can know whether or not what you're saying is what you meant to say. And that will be my litmus test, is each time I listen to it or think about it, is it saying what I set out to say?